Hello, it's me. Happy November. Oh my gosh, what was it? There was like the funniest thing that I was gonna say, and I was even like, oh, let me write this down. I'm so witty. So stupid. Um, I had to pick up a couple things yesterday, and I'm normally not, sorry, this is like totally a side tangent. I'm normally not a holiday person at all. Like, holidays are great and all, but I had to work. I mean, I did. I worked retail for a huge chunk of my life. And so you sort of like learn to get really numb to holidays because you're usually working them or dealing with the craziness of them. And so anyway, so normally I'm kind of like bah humbug when it comes to holidays, but for whatever reason, with the exception of Halloween, obviously, but for whatever reason, when I was like shopping yesterday, you know how like your olfactory, how your senses sort of can bring back like memories or just, any of those kinds of things. And I was out and about shopping at like, I don't know, the like, not like the dollar store, but there's like a $5 store. Anyway, this is like a total tangent, I apologize. But I was out and about, and then I like smelled like the pine cone, like pine cones that had this like holiday scent or whatever. Anyway, I came up with this like really witty thing in my head unintentionally, and I was like, oh, I should write that down and then like pretend to say it like all witty or whatever when I film. But then I was like, oh no, I'll remember. And so yeah, so this is me not being witty, but when I smelled those pine cones, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm actually into it this year. I don't know. With the exception of Eclipse Myths, which we'll get into later. But anyway, thanks for listening to my tangent. The two upcoming themes for the month of November are number 1, rest your wings, and number 2, much needed clarity. All right, so as we dive into the first week of November, basically the first week of November is probably going to be the most challenging, I would say. There's a little bit of bite like the very last week, but I anticipate this first week sort of almost being the course of events that sort of seal the deal from things that happen throughout the month of October. We have the Mars-Pluto square that's coming up this upcoming week. So I would just, beware tempers can flare, or certain feelings of like aggressiveness can kind of like come on a little bit stronger. Maybe people might have a little bit more road rage than usual. Like, I don't know, like any of those kinds of things. But it's important because this particular configuration is around the 20 to 21 degree range. And, this is also where we had, the 20 to 21 degree range of cardinal signs, which is also where the full moon was at last month, which is also where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is going to be in January. So there's just kind of like a little bit of a mix there. It's also a couple degrees off from the lunar eclipse that we had back in July. So I know that that's like a lot of random information that's like a little bit too astro overboard. But essentially, there might be certain things that surface that come up this week, but just write it out, because after this week is through, the full moon is next week, the second week of November. But after we get through this first week, despite the full moon, it's literally like our time to, as I said, rest your wings. The month of October was a tough month for a lot of people. If the month of July was a little bit challenging for you and the month of January was a little bit challenging for you, that probably means that you have some cardinal placements in your chart that are very crucial. And and so it's likely that October was not the most amazing month. But as we hit into, for the rest of November, the transits are relatively mellow. We definitely always, just as humans, we notice when things are not always going right, but we sometimes forget to notice when nothing, like not when nothing is going wrong, but when things aren't really like going wrong or aren't as pressing or as intense as they are when things aren't going right. So as you get that time during this month, just remember to be thankful and have gratitude, I guess, because I think that that's something that's really important. So, something else I wanted to touch on is that so Mercury retrograde is something that's going on right now. I know that that always gets a lot of hype in social media, and I'm always joking about it. But this particular Mercury retrograde is not nearly as intense as some of the other ones that we've had this year, mostly being that the other ones that we've had earlier on in the year were tied up with eclipses as well. So the eclipse really laid in some extra not awesome juju, but this month it's different. And, there's been a lot of things that have been sort of going on, I think, since July. Things escalated again in October. And then now as we enter in and we're going through this particular time, it really shows that there's going to be sort of a lot of clarity. And the reason why I said that is a couple things. One is that we have Mercury stationed direct later on in the month. Mercury is a planet that governs communication, thought process, social media, technology, communication, all of that kind of stuff. And so when Mercury stations direct, we're going to have a little bit more, let's just be like a little bit like less like miscommunications and things. But the other thing that's really cool that sort of ties into the like clarity theme, right, is also that the planet Neptune is stationing direct. And, Neptune's sole job is to blur boundaries. And when Neptune is retrograde, though it's something that we don't notice as prevalently as we would some of the personal planets in our daily life, with Neptune there, we sort of get, Neptune's job is to blur boundaries. So when it is in retrograde motion, which is when it appears to be going backwards in the sky, it's definitely a time more of introspection, and it's just more of a haze time overall. I mean, it's retrograde for about 6 months out of the year, so we don't really notice it as much, but we definitely notice it once the haze is lifted. So just kind of keep that in mind. There's also a couple zingers that like happen like the very last week of November, like around November 24th. I think it's around the 24th. We have both the Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the same day that we have the Mars-Uranus opposition. So I see some type of like, in addition to like this clarity stuff that's going on, I also see something sort of like coming out of left field that offers that helps to elevate the clarity process. So just sort of like keep in mind for any type of like unpredictable things going on around the last week of November. So anyway, overall, like honestly, if you made it through October, like November's going to be a breeze. Just get through this first week. Be on the lookout for some type of like surprise thing happening towards like the last week of the month. It's going to be different for each of you depending upon where the placement happens in your chart and whether or not it's configuring planets in your natal chart. But it definitely shows somewhat of a surprise element. And I guess because it's, in my personal opinion, because I see it with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, I don't necessarily see it as being bad. So anyway, food for thought. Hang in there. You made it this far. November is definitely the month where it's time for us to kind of catch our breath. December, towards the end of December, beginning first half of January, we're gonna kind of grace through a couple of eclipses again. So definitely like hone in and take in this time while you can. This year there's actually an eclipse on Christmas Day. I know that Christmas is a holiday that a lot of people celebrate, and I will dive into that a little bit more for the video for December. But for October, yeah, just let it kind of breeze through you, and try to just give yourself some love surrounding things that happen during the month of October. And just know that November is going to be a much better month. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you around. Cheers.